affairs correspondent at The Eye, Molly Blackall. Happy New Year, ladies.
Happy New Year.
Oh, it's exciting, isn't it? Then we look at the papers. We're going to start with the Daily Mirror and Keir Starmer's message to the public, essentially. Molly, take us through that.
Well, the Mirror's coverage, at least, is quite an optimistic note, I think, for Starmer's message, particularly honing in on the fact that this year will be the 80th anniversary of VE Day, marking the end of World War II. They're saying there could be street parties like we saw at the 50th anniversary in 1995, but Downing Street has said there are no plans for a bank holiday, so scratch that one out of your diaries. However, there is a slightly darker note in this message. It's quite sobering, really, as a New Year address goes. Keir Starmer says it's hard to think about the future when you're fighting to get through the week. He's sort of acknowledging that even though there is an optimistic start, hopefully, to 2025, for so many people, you know, the cost of bills, the cost of food has got so high that really there's not a lot necessarily to feel hopeful about, I think, this year.
And then, Emma, there's a slightly different take on Keir Starmer in The Times. Talk us through this, please.
Starmer can be as positive and as optimistic as he likes in his New Year's Day message, and of course he has to be. And it's interesting that he's referencing things like VE Day because he's kind of really, you know...
It's harking back, isn't it?
Well, I think he's, you know, scratching the bottom of the barrel there. That's got nothing to do with his New Year's Day message. This new YouGov poll, which The Times are covering, is very bad news for Labour. More bad news. We had a poll the other day, I think it was More in Common, that gave them, you know, plummeting lowest popularity ratings for anyone, I think, since Corbyn left office as Labour leader. But most voters, according to this YouGov poll, most voters now see Labour as incompetent, dishonest and unsuccessful. Only 31% of voters are optimistic about the year ahead. So Keir Starmer is admitting in his New Year's Day message that it needs to be a year of rebuilding. He's only been, his government has only been in for 5-6 months. To talk of rebuilding already, he wants to restore prosperity, to repair public services, and obviously he wants to restore his own poll ratings. But no, they're not good. They're not good findings, and this is not a positive start to Starmer for the new year. That Labour are behind the Tories on the economy. Only 21% trust Labour on the economy, 24% would trust the Conservatives more. And actually, interestingly, I think, it's amongst Labour voters that the lack of trust, the lack of confidence in their own, in the people that they did support, is lowest. And yeah, I think he's got a lot of work to do. People have been saying this could be his first and last year in Christmas in Downing Street, but we'll see.
I think to some extent, you know, he stormed through, didn't he, with that absolutely landslide victory that we saw now last year. And I think to some extent, you're always going to experience a dip after that point. You know, they were riding incredibly high. But I think, you know, this is not going to make for easy reading for them, you know, on their first day of 2025. And the Tories now enjoying their first lead since Liz Truss. Admittedly, I think that was quite a low point, they would admit. But yeah, it's not great news.
But many people admitting, Emma, the vote for Labour last year was a protest vote against 14 years of a Conservative government. So the popularity wasn't about voting for Sir Keir Starmer as a leader like that 1997 Tony Blair vote,
exactly.
perhaps.
It wasn't that optimistic landslide where people rushed out to vote, you know, really did in 97, and there was a real sense of new Labour, new Britain and all of that. Many people on July the 4th didn't feel they had an option, sort of best of a bad bunch, that kind of thing. A lot of people stayed home. You know, turnout was not high. Labour didn't get a huge, you know, it was a landslide, but the options, as you say, were Conservatives or Reform or Lib Dems. So it was, mixed findings there.
The Guardian going with a story about Russia and gas supply to Europe via Ukraine, Molly, because, you know, lots of people will be watching, worrying about those energy bills that are ahead of them this year.
Absolutely, and Starmer's sort of nodding to all of that, isn't he? I think some people would be surprised that energy is still coming from Russia, actually. And certainly there has been a mass cutting of ties since they invaded Ukraine in February 2022. But this is part of a deal which was made before that point. So actually it's a supply feed which has been coming into Europe for more than 40 years. It does primarily serve Austria and Slovakia, so it won't be too direct. But it does contribute to a large share of European supply. So what's happened here is that Ukraine has effectively refused to renew its deal with the Russian energy supplier. So this is finally going to pack up. In terms of, how significant this is, at its peak, Russian energy made up about 35% of the European gas market. It's dropped significantly since the invasion of Ukraine. It now stands at about 8%. It's not as significant as it was. And the EU Commission has been quick to come out and say, don't worry, we can match up the supply ourselves. But as you say, people are going to be watching this really carefully. We saw a massive spike in the price of energy bills, and that's had a knock-on effect on everything, food, products. So it's just sort of more bad news, basically, for the energy market.
And closer to home, Emma, the Daily Telegraph, going with the fact that VAT on private schools, well, that starts
Today. Although, ironically, and I think I speak as someone, all of you actually, who have young children, the schools are still off. The schools are still off. But anyway, I think this week is particularly tough for parents. I have to say, I said when I was elected Prime Minister, I would abolish school holidays, and I got a very good response. Or excessively long school holidays, because this week, this extra week, Monday started on the 30th, it feels like a bit of an insult. You've got them through the Christmas mania, and now we've still got another week to go.
I have an inset day on Monday.
And I have an inset day on Monday. So it's just insult to injury.
Yeah, they're taking the mick with you guys.
They're taking the mick. And you sort of realise it's 18 days. Anyway, enough about my parental woes. It's lovely, but the holidays are long.
Oh, yeah.
Today is the first day that they impose this 20% VAT increase on private schools. I have to say, I think it's been a very controversial imposition, a very controversial move. But I have to say, I think Labour's messaging on this has been all over the place. We've had Bridget Phillipson, Education Secretary, and Keir Starmer recently, in the last few days, saying middle-class parents support this. They've also said it won't actually affect many, many people. They've also said, oh, most private schools won't pass on the 20%. They won't pass on the full cost. We're now finding out in the Telegraph that actually most private schools are planning to increase fees by 14% up to 20%. So they will be passing on. It's going to have a big impact. It's going to have a big impact on parents, on children, on special needs children who need specific support, who have disabilities or emotional challenges that can't be met within the state sector. We've got the government promising all this money is going to be rolled out and go into the state sector, but actually it's not that big a deal. So I think they need to get some clarity on this. But yeah, it is going to have a big impact on smaller. Okay, we know about Eton, we know about the big schools, but there are lots of smaller private schools in local areas who are going to be affected. And to me, it feels like children are being weaponised a bit.
Yeah. We'll have to leave it there. Do join us after the break with our top stories.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm